Hello, my name is Tom Nguyen from Teradata. Welcome to the SAS and Teradata Technology Showcase. I am joined today by Lisa Dotson from SAS.
Hello.
And Paul Siegel from Teradata.
G'day.
And we're going to show you Score Accelerator for Teradata from SAS. It is a way to score your models. In the previous video, you had seen how we have developed the model, and now we're actually able to score that model to see the results. Lisa, I'm going to turn over to you to give the audience an overview of what Score Accelerator is all about.
Sure, absolutely. So it's not just about, executing the score necessarily inside of Teradata, which is very fast. But one of the biggest challenges that customers have is actually this deployment process of the models that they generate. Deployment often involves a multi-step process where the analyst first develops the model, but then the code has to be converted in order to execute into whatever environment that they need to execute the model in. So SAS Scoring Accelerator, in conjunction with SAS Enterprise Miner, which we'll see from Paul, simplifies the process by providing the code for an Enterprise Miner directly to the database. That translation or conversion is automatic in order for that code to be executed.
Thank you. So let me start off with bringing up Enterprise Miner. So you can see here I have a fairly simple workflow. I'm just doing basic clustering on some data. And I have this score node and this score code export node. Now there are two ways to make use of Scoring Accelerator. There's the easy way and the not so easy way, or not as easy way, better way of putting it. The easy way is to use SAS Model Manager. It allows you to pick up this code from the metadata repository and basically just push button deploy it into the database, push button scoring. If you don't have Model Manager, you can still make use of Scoring Accelerator, but it involves some manual executions of SAS macros, which is the process I'm going to show in this video. So the reason I have this score export node is it actually writes off to the file system some of the key information that SAS requires to push this into the database as scoring code. So I'm going to I am going to start off by publishing the code. So I need to initialize the Scoring Accelerator subsystem. I do that by executing this macro. So indtdpm, in database Teradata publish model. Oops. So let's just run that. Now there are two ways we can actually deploy models into the database using Scoring Accelerator. There's the old deprecated way, which involved using a vendor-defined function. So we generated the model as C code, we put a header around it, or a wrapper around it, compiled it, deployed it to the node, and it became an extension to SQL. There were some issues with that, mainly around the maintenance of it, because it generated multiple vendor-defined functions. So we've actually created the new preferred way, which is significantly quicker to execute the models. And that uses the DS2 code that we saw in previous videos. So we can actually pick up the DS2 code that Enterprise Miner generates and publish that into the database, and we'll execute natively in that embedded processor that I talked about earlier. Now the way we do that is we need to create a table in the database that holds the DS2 code. And we have complete control. We could put everything into one big table. We could have tables by project, tables by department, completely up to you. I'm just creating a table in the database called test models because I have no imagination. So I'll create this table. And now I'm actually going to publish that DS2 code into that table. So I do this by calling this macro. So indtd publish model. This is the file, the location on the file system where I wrote the information out in my score export node. we can see, if I click on this, we can see there it is there. I give my model a name. I've called it clustering. Again, no imagination thing. It's going into my table test models. If it already exists, replace it and use the EP, the DS2 embedded process style. That's the default now. So let me run that. And there my code's now in the database, ready for me to score. Now I'm going to take a bit of a detour because the model, also the data I'm going to score against, isn't actually sitting in my Teradata system. It's sitting in my Hadoop system. So how do I get access to that? So in Teradata we have a bit of software called Query Grid, and that allows you to reach into external systems easily and bring the data up. So we will reach into my Hadoop system, surface the data up, we'll score against that, then we'll flush the data out. So we're not keeping a permanent copy of the data. And to make it easy, we have what's called a foreign server definition. This is set up by the DBAs, and so set it up once and everybody gets to use it. So I'll show you the foreign server definition. And it contains all the technical information, such as how are we connecting to the server? We're going in via Hive. We're going in via this port. We're going into this server. How do we import data? How do we export data? All the stuff that most quantitative analysts couldn't care less about. So what the foreign server allows us to do is to abstract all that technical infrastructure stuff. All we need to know is the table or the data exists in that machine and what the machine's called. I've called it Apex. So here I'm going to create a view called cluster HY, which is bringing in some data, and it's coming from the SAS E2EH schema in my Hadoop server. The table itself, or the data set itself, is called CL prep out, and I'm getting it from Apex. So I don't need to worry about what the IP address is, how I log in, what the movement mechanism is. All I need to know is where it's located and the name of this foreign server. So I've abstracted all that information away from the user. So I'll go and create this view. And now I can use that in my scoring. So this is where we do the scoring. So if you're using Model Manager, you'd say, score this now. We're not using Model Manager, so it's a bit of a manual process. So I call a stored procedure on the Teradata system. Tell it the table name that contains the DS2 code. What's the name of the model that I wish to score? So in this case, it's clustering. The data's coming from my cluster HY. That's the view that's going to reach into Hadoop, surface the data, score, then get rid of it. It's going into a table called clustered out. So all my results are going into there. And the primary index or primary key is this S_KY. So let's run this. And it's going through into my Hadoop server, locating the data, bringing it over into what's called spool in Teradata, which is, think of it as temporary scratch space in Teradata. Surfacing that data up, it's scoring against that. Then once the scoring's been done, it'll just flush the spool. So no permanent copies of the data are being kept. And there we go. So 26 seconds to score my records. If I want to go and have a look, this is the raw data, or sample of the raw data. And if I do a proc freak on this, I can actually go and look at the cluster information. So we can see cluster 1's 27% of the total, cluster 2's 15, cluster 3's 25, cluster 4's only 9%. That's probably the cluster we'd be interested in. It's usually the small clusters that contain the useful information. And one of the other key benefits of being able to score like this in place in the database is if we wanted to, we could pass in new up-to-date information. So as an example, let's say I could call up my bank and say, I've just inherited $250,000. What should I do with it? The call centre person can type in lump sum $250,000 into their screen, press a button. It will go and send that $250,000 lump sum information into the database, into a scoring algorithm, pick up the rest of the information it needs from the database, generate a next best offer for me, send that back to the call centre operative, and up will pop their script to sell me whichever monetary instrument was the best for my situation. So you can get down to that level of on-demand scoring, which can be a real game changer for a lot of companies.
Paul, thank you. And as we have demonstrated, Scoring Accelerator is very powerful, a way to score easily a model. We have demonstrated to you the SAS and Teradata end-to-end capabilities by loading the data, cleansing the data, manipulating and preparing the data for analysis, developing the model, and now scoring the model. Lisa, Paul, thank you. And thank you for your attention.